I'd like now to introduce our keynote this morning, Eugenie Teasley, who will be talking about Uber's workplace culture. What do you do when it all goes really, really wrong? Eugenie joins Uber after a 15-year career in education and non-profits across the globe. She stepped down from her role as CEO of the Goodall Foundation to take up this role at Uber, keen to apply her years of collaborative partnership work in a new, very different context. Previous roles have included working at Dave Eggers' writing lab, 826 Valencia in San Francisco, which I'm particularly jealous of because he's one of my favourite writers, and setting up her own youth charity, Spark and Metal, helping young people to foster new skills and be ready to succeed via an online coaching platform. Eugenie.
Good morning, everybody. Very nice to be here this morning. In fact, it's a real honour because this is my home patch. I've now lived in Brighton for almost 9 years, so it's really fun to be able to speak in front of all of you and also to see familiar faces from previous roles. So lovely to see people who I've worked with and been able to chat with previously here today. I actually agreed to do this talk even before I took up the role formally at Uber. And Phil Jones very generously gave the talk its title, and in so doing, I think, provided me with a hospital pass. So thank you, Phil. So 3 things that you should really know. One, as I said, I'm brand new to Uber. In fact, this is only week 8 of my time in the role here. So I'm still finding my feet in the company. 2, I have to confess, I really am not an expert in attracting and retaining talent in the digital sector. And 3, because I'm so new, I can't really speak personally to much of what went on in the company before I joined. But I can tell you why I did decide to leave charity land after 15 years and take up a role in such a full-on for-profit tech company, what I have personally noticed since joining in these few short weeks, and also to share with you some of the learning and experience that far more knowledgeable people within the company have expressed over the last 18 months in particular. But first, let's go back. March 2009. Can everybody here think about what they were doing back then? At that time, I was actually living in Oakland and working in San Francisco at 826 Valencia, which Claire just mentioned. With the man that I'd just married and our 2 dogs, we were slowly packing up our stuff, about to move back to the UK. I had absolutely no idea that right around the corner from where I was living and working, 2 guys were coming up with an idea for an app that would enable people to get from A to B at just the touch of a button. Fast forward to sort of 9 years' time, and Uber is now known as one of the fastest growing tech companies of all time. It has 18,000 employees across the globe. And that's not to mention the 75 million riders and the 3 million drivers who rely on it routinely. Uber is now operating in, that's crazy, 600 cities across 65 countries on 6 continents. And last year, the gross bookings that were made, and that's the amount that riders pay, amounted to $37 billion. The vast majority of which, like approximately 75%, goes directly to the drivers themselves. So this is the kind of hockey stick growth, not just of startup textbooks, but really of startup legend. It is off the charts. But it's clear also that that sort of growth has not come without cost. As many of you may know, in early 2017, it became increasingly clear that Uber needed to think about evolving some of its business practices and culture. In February of last year, a woman called Susan Fowler, who is a female engineer in San Francisco, wrote a blog post that went viral. In it, she described troubling behavior and other incidents that really caused her to have a very negative experience at Uber. Its chief people officer, Leanne Hornsey, had actually only been in post for a month when this blog post came out. And she talks about how hundreds of employees were coming up to her and asking what they should do. And this was her response. She said, "My answer was always the same. We need to use Susan's input to bring about change and be genuinely kind and caring towards each other." At the time, it was hard for me to understand exactly what was happening, but in retrospect, it's clear. One very brave piece of prose, authentically written, created a lightning rod for change at Uber. Last autumn, Uber had a new CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, who joined after running Expedia for 12 years. One of the first things he did, really interestingly to me, was to crowdsource new norms for the company, new cultural norms. And these are the 8 that you can see here. One of them, the one in the top right-hand corner, simply states, "We do the right thing, period." It's the one that I happen to have as my screensaver. And this is a man called Tony West, who's the general counsel at Uber and used to be a key figure in the Obama administration. And he says that in order to do the right thing, right, to make that happen, you need 3 key things: transparency, integrity, and accountability. Now, coming from the world of charity land, right, and education, these are 3 things that have been absolutely crucial to me in my career to date. But to be honest, when I was looking for a new role at the beginning of this year, I had absolutely no idea that they were important to Uber. So a little bit more about my background. As Claire very helpfully said, I was working in charity and education for about 15 years. I set up this nonprofit called Spark and Metal, building character strengths and soft skills in young people, and actually really trying to help them to go in the sorts of businesses that many of you run who are here today, the sort of non-traditional businesses where there aren't well-worn pathways to be able to access and get into them if you don't know people and are not able to get your foot in the door that way. And then more recently helping set up the Goodall Foundation, which was a philanthropic foundation, which I set up and helped run for a very successful entrepreneur here in the city of Brighton. So it's been an amazing career to date. And 2 strands have always kind of wound themselves through everything that I've done. The first is the belief in the democratizing power of technology. I love that it can be a force for good. And I do not love that it can be a source of division. And I always want to search out ways of maximizing the former to make technology better for more people, while also trying to minimize the latter, so how to make it less divisive and more collaborative and more supportive. So that's one strand that's woven itself through my working life today. And the second is my fundamental belief that we should all, regardless of our backgrounds, be able to flourish, to fulfill our potential, and to sustain ourselves, and to find the work that is meaningful for us in whatever we want to do. And that really kind of came to me when I was teaching in Elephant and Castle, South London. It grew during my roles both here and abroad, and it matters even more to me now that I'm getting grey hairs on my head, which I am dying, and noticing that nothing has really gotten much better. So why did I leave charity land and join a company like Uber? I suppose it's because I felt like I had been working outside of big business for a long time, and the change that I was making with young people was significant for the few that I was really being able to support. And I wanted to see that if actually I could work within a big company, maybe I could begin to kind of manifest some of the changes that I'd love to see in the world at a significant and sustainable scale. So that's one reason why I joined Uber. Another is because the job title for the role I was going for is pretty awesome. It's head of cities. I am head of the cities. So that is definitely gratifying. But the third kind of real one is that I genuinely believe and am drawn to the new direction that the new CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, has for the company. Really summing up that it just wants to now be a better partner to the cities and the communities that it serves, and wants to interact with the businesses, the individuals, and everybody who go to make up the ecosystem and the ecosystems in which Uber is operating. I think that its reputation still precedes all the Priuses quite a lot these days. But when I was doing my digging into Uber, when I was wanting to apply for the role, I read about its new brand officer called Bozoma St. John, who's just a freaking rock star, saying that she joined the company last summer. That's the summer of 2017, when everything was going on. I said she wanted to join it then because she wanted to be part of the solution. And when I read that she had said that, I kind of wanted to high-five her from all the way across the pond. But when you Google Uber, as I did a lot during the recruitment process, all this stuff about new norms and a change in direction is not what comes up at the top of the search function, right? In fact, I had to do an awful lot of digging to try and find out all of these changes and what was happening. And I also had a lot of conversations. It so happened that I had engaged with some of the people who were working with Uber here in the UK and was actually genuinely impressed with all my grilling of various kind of hardcore questions to them, what their responses were. But apparently one of the reasons why this isn't kind of being made public until quite recently is because there was a kind of deliberate thinking about keeping it internal and actually trying to make the changes happen on the inside before talking about them on the outside. I'm going to quote Leanne Hornsey again, the CPO, who said that we knew that creating a new Uber would require more than slapping on a fresh coat of paint and new curtains. Curb appeal is easy, she says. Seismic retrofitting is not. So aside from the new cultural norms, which I shared just before, there's been a huge amount of time and energy spent internally revamping things like hiring and performance management practices, making sure that men and women and those of different racial groups are all paid equally, and improving other things like benefits for families. So those are some of the internal changes that have been made over the last few months in the company. But how did they actually get to that? What was the process and what was the learning that's happened in a big company with a big year like last year? What has the learning and the reflections been? I highly recommend looking at a blog post that Leanne Hornsey wrote and published earlier this year, which is all about 6 lessons. And these are the 6 that she talks about, and I encourage you to have a look and read it more thoroughly yourself. First of all, to listen deeply, to be visible, even when you want to step away, right, into the shadows, is to step out. To involve everybody, that's from the top rung leaders down to the brand new employees. Emphasize inclusion, and that's making it a really conscious piece that actually kind of threads its way through the KPIs and achievements of everybody, from those right at the top all the way through. Disagree and commit. I think this is my favorite of the 6 because it's really encouraging difference of opinion, right? It's not saying we're here to make sure that everybody agrees and we're all kind of singing off the same hymn sheet. Actually, it's saying we need to disagree, we need to voice our own opinions, and we need to allow those to be there, visible in the spaces, because if they get pushed to the edges, that's when challenges can really start. So I really like the frankness of this approach. But then at the same time, when a decision is made, that everybody around the table commits to it and tries to ensure that it is delivered in the best way possible. And finally, one that I particularly champion, my previous charities, as I mentioned, is called Spark and Metal, so all about resilience, right? It's about being resilient. And actually, the changes that you need to make with a company at this scale, they're going to take time to seed, both internally, and they're going to take a lot longer to be recognized externally. And you just have to stick with it. This is not a quick fix. As she says, there's some seismic retrofitting to be done. Leanne, the CPO, has said that her goal is to make Uber the most inclusive company on the planet, where all employees feel safe, supported, and empowered to be successful. I really love how ambitious that goal is and how public. Just after I started, Uber published its 2018 diversity report, which showed modest improvements on last year's report. There have been gains on women in the workforce, women in tech, and women in tech leadership. And by tech, I mean kind of like, proper tech roles, engineering, etc. My role within a tech company is definitely not a tech one. And it also saw gains in the proportion of underrepresented groups, both in terms of leadership and in tech as well. And for the first time this year, it gave an option for employees to voluntarily self-identify as LGBTQ+, so that there could be a more inclusive and kind of clear snapshot of the employee base. So Uber is slowly on its way to becoming a more inclusive company. And I have to say that in my first few weeks here as a fairly senior woman for the UK team, it has genuinely been unwaveringly positive. And I think that's because I've come in really on the upswing, right, where there is this kind of agreement and alignment about this new sense of direction internally. So on my first day, for example, I was kind of randomly impromptu invited to a Women of Uber meeting. And it was super interesting listening to all my new colleagues really talking enthusiastically about their plans for the year. And it felt as though they were really energized because they knew that their company's leaders are now really tuning in to their thoughts, ideas, and hopes. I've been listening to managers really acknowledging and building on ideas and suggestions that they're hearing from people around the table. And I see them really consciously thinking through ideas and suggestions that don't naturally align with their own. And I think that's something that is a kind of muscle that we all need to work, right? We always go for things that kind of sound like the sort of thing that we want and we agree with. And it's really interesting to see that people are kind of being very conscious about trying to do this differently. And I've actually attended already some diversity and inclusion training. And what was really interesting was seeing the range of people in the room, not just the underrepresented groups, which is so often the case in diversity and inclusion training if it's non-mandatory. But there, voluntarily, I was seeing the senior, white, male managers in that room as well, taking part. And that, for me, felt very important. But all these internal changes, these new norms, Leanne's lessons, they are really, really important for rebuilding workforce culture, kind of from the ground up. But it doesn't mean to say that they do much for external reputation, right? Last autumn, the refusal by London for Uber's license was yet another wake-up call for the company across the globe. And even here in Brighton, fast forward 9 months, we still have to work really, really hard to rebuild trust. Brighton is home to extraordinary businesses full and individuals and universities full of some of the most creative, innovative minds. And yet we just had our license recently refused here. In fact, on my second week, I think, of working. So it was a hugely disappointing decision, not just for me, but also for the thousands of people who rely on Uber in this city here every day. Uber is now appealing this decision, and while that appeal is in process, it carries on as usual here in the city. But meanwhile, the company is really intent to build back trust in the cities and communities that it wants to be a part of, both now and in the future. And it's working really hard to do that, which is honestly one of the reasons why I joined. I think that in this role of wanting to become a better partner, I felt like I really could give something to it, which is one of the reasons that I really wanted to get in on the role. Just at the end of last month, it announced a European-wide partnership with AXA, which provides insurance cover to drivers, so things like sick pay, maternity and paternity cover, at no cost to the drivers at all. And that is actually just the latest in a fleet of changes. So it has recently implemented capping driver hours to prevent them from driving too long so that they don't drive tired. It's also really improved a number of safety features for both riders and drivers. And it's been working with things like the Metropolitan Police and other forces around the country to improve reporting on serious crime. As well as actually doing things like working with Barnardo's and Unseen UK to provide really advanced safeguarding training to the drivers who are so often the eyes and ears of what goes on in a city. So I really appreciate all the internal changes that are being made in Uber, kind of around these cultural norms, the improved hiring practices, etc. I think those are really, really important and vital for building kind of culture and engagement and kind of energy within the organization. But I have to say that the things that really fill me with pride and purpose working at Uber are these sorts of changes, the ones that are making it a company that is better, fairer, and safer for drivers and riders and cities at extraordinary scale across the globe. In my mind, a buoyant company culture is not just rooted in the norms that it has and the policy that it makes, but is also held up by its vision and its mission. If those are soaring and big and bold, then there's real purpose in the work that we as employees and managers and leaders do. Uber really wants to tackle some of the major 21st century urban challenges such as air pollution, congestion and parking by encouraging people to use private cars for public good. But the vision doesn't just stop there. Dara Khosrowshahi, I'm just going to say his name loads of times because I've just totally nailed pronouncing it. So Dara Khosrowshahi has said that he wants cars to be to Uber what books are to Amazon. And I really love, again, how ambitious that goal is. We want to make it super easy for everybody to get anywhere very easily. And that's why we're championing this truly multimodal, integrated way of moving around. So just recently, we acquired Jump, which is an electric-powered bike-sharing scheme over in the US. And we've also just really recently partnered with Virgin Trains here in the UK because we want to enable people to be able to get to and from public transport really seamlessly as well. And that's why we've been investing in self-driving cars as well as Uber Air. Now, you might call these flying taxis. We call them on-demand urban aviation. And with commercial rides expected to fly in 2023. But we're grounding all this talk of our role in the future of urban mobility by having conversations with businesses, with councils, and with others, both here in the UK and authorities across the globe, to ensure that this future that we imagine will work honestly and properly for them. We really want to make sure that all the big ideas that we have around the future of urban mobility are going to be really used well in the cities that we're operating so that we can be a better partner, not just today and not just tomorrow, but many years in the future too. Uber never believes that it's like the panacea to everything, but it definitely wants to be part of the solutions going forward. We're kicking that off actually with this clean air plan, which is our hope to get our the cars on the Uber platform, either hybrid or fully electric, just within the next few years across the whole of the UK. So I think that a company can change its direction, right? I think that it's fair to say that when Uber started as this app that could just get people from A to B, thinking about these major 21st urban challenges wasn't necessarily like part of the priority. They just wanted to have like a super awesome black car service. So I think that's changed. And I think that when it does transform its direction, if there is buy-in, genuine buy-in in leadership, that can properly overhaul its culture, genuinely change the direction, and really attract people to join and to stay. Really, in the grand scheme of things, Uber is just at the start of its journey. And it has just turned a massive, massive corner. And I, for one, am really excited to be in on the ride. Thank you. If you do want to ask any questions, so I live in Brighton, I'm here a lot when I'm not kind of pinging around to other places, and would absolutely love to talk to you. Unfortunately, I can't stay for too long this morning, but my email address is right there. I hope you can see it. It's just eugenie@uber.com. Please email me, and I will respond and would love to find opportunities to take. One of the things that I really wanted to do today was have the opportunity for you to ask questions to me directly of any concerns or any opportunities that you see for Uber, both in the city and further afield. So please just kind of throw them my way or tweet them to me, whatever you want to do. I'm really happy to respond and engage. And also, if you think there are any opportunities for partnership with Uber, both in terms of thinking about, in whatever way, shape or form, from strategic partnerships to being able to support getting people from A to B, do let me know, because super happy to be able to help with that too. Thank you.